There's a cat over here. There's a cat over there. And the wrong one died. And the wrong one died.
Welcome to The Wrong Cat Died, the podcast breakdown of the catastrophe. I'm your host, Mike Abrams, and today we have another amazing guest. He was Mungojerrie in the fourth U.S. national tour, which was, I believe, around 92 to 94-ish range. So welcome, Gavan Pamer, and thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
I'm excited.
Glad to be here.
I'm excited. I haven't talked to anyone on the fourth tour. I've talked to the third, I've talked to the fifth, I've talked to the sixth, I've talked to the Broadway cast, but no one on the fourth tour. So I would love to kick things off a little bit with what was it like on the fourth tour when you're kind of in the middle of the initial Broadway run. You predate the 1998 movie. Mm-hmm. People might have seen the third tour, so it's a complete unknown, but it's still a pretty wild experience for anyone seeing it at any time. So what was it like in the early 90s?
Well, our tour opened in 1987, and our tour was designed to play all of the cities that the larger companies couldn't fit in. So our tour was designed to go up in 8 hours, to load the set in 8 hours, and come down in 3 hours. And it was designed to play the smaller cities that the first national, second national, and the third national couldn't play. So all three of those companies had raked stages, which are higher in the back and lower in the front. And our company was designed on a flat actual stage. And so we were designed to play anywhere you could possibly play. And we played everywhere. And I joined the company in October of 92. My actual anniversary is the same as the Broadway anniversary. I joined in October 7th, 1992. And the show was still a phenomenon. We were still breaking box office records across the country because we were playing cities that had never had the show before. You know, Philadelphia had the first national, LA had the second national, and they were sit-down companies. And the third national played a lot of the larger market, but we got anywhere you name it, we played it. And I played 48 out of the 50 states. The only two states that I didn't play with cats was Alaska, which they have played after I left, and Vermont was the only state. And I've even played Hawaii with cats. But I've played pretty much every major city and smaller city across the country.
Why no Vermont?
I don't know. I just never got to it. I mean, I've driven through Vermont, but we just never played it for some reason. It was never booked there.
So your tour started at the same time as the third, is what you're saying?
Yeah, the third national started in 1986, and we started in 1987.
Okay.
And
so
they
you
were out
kind
2 years.
Touring together at points.
For the first year, because again, because of their rake stage, they were still having difficulty loading in and out. Mm-hmm. And so our set was literally designed to be the most functional to get in and out quickly. And our show actually ran for 12 years. We actually beat, if you can believe this, here's a bit of trivia. While I was on the road, we beat the record Oklahoma that went out in 1943, ran for 10 years consecutively. Our company beat Oklahoma's record. And that was 1993, 94 that we beat the record for longest touring production. Then, of course, Les Mis beat us, and then Phantom beat Les Mis by like 4 months. And they were out like almost 17 years. But we ran for 12 consecutive years, never missing a show. Yeah.
That is wild.
Yeah.
So I want to stick with here, and then we'll go to a little bit. But what was it like in these smaller towns where it is, we'll get into the plot and the backstories and everything else, but it is a visual experience and a sexual experience and something that I can imagine being in maybe some of these more conservative small towns or, as you're not in the main metropolitan areas. What kind of reactions did you get? Kind of a wide range of reactions across the board?
When I say it was the Hamilton of its day, it was the Rent of its day. Everybody wanted to see this show. We sold out absolutely everywhere. When we played the Muni, we played St. Louis Muni, which is an outdoor theater that holds 12,000 people. We broke box office records and sold $1 million in 1 week. I mean, like everybody loved the show and they wanted to see the show. And it came out sort of around the same time that Les Mis and Phantom were touring as well, but those were such larger shows than ours. that they still were playing the sit downs for like 9 weeks. When we were out, Phantom of the Opera was sitting down for 9 weeks at a time in cities. We were literally playing 1 week. The most we played in the major cities like LA, we would play for 2 weeks. DC, we always played for 4 weeks. Boston, we were there for 2 weeks. So the major cities, we were still in 1997 when I left the show. We were still playing those major cities for 4 weeks at a time because the show was that much of a phenomenon. And then sometimes you would play what was called a split week, where you would go and start the first half of the week. You would play Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and do 3 shows in a college town somewhere, and then finish the weekend out doing 5 shows in another smaller town. And so it was pretty much on the bus, off the bus, do the show, get back on the bus, go to a new town and do the show. And there was a point on the tour, it was the arena tour, where we did arenas every single night, where you would play a 10,000, 15,000 seat arena, do the show for one night, pack everything back on the bus and go out, because they could load the show in 8 hours and pull it down in 3. And you're back in, they packed everything into 6 trucks and 2 buses with the cast. And we went on our merry way.
Wow. So you did, I never heard about an arena tour for Cats.
Well, it was one of those promotional things that some promoter had a really great idea and said, hey, this would be a really great idea on how to make this big money. And they did. I mean, yeah.
Well, yeah. So, if you sit in a basketball stadium and take out just maybe a quarter of it to put the stage, you're still talking 14, 15,000 seats easy.
A night. Yeah, absolutely.
Every single place versus what's a normal
theater, like
4,000 or 5,000?
When you play, like Broadway houses are around 1,200. Those are the larger Broadway houses, but now they get up to like 27. Like the Benedum in Pittsburgh, where I'm from, was about 2,700 seats, 2,300 seats. So you're roughly going between 1,200 seats and 2,700 seats. But then there were towns that we would play. We played Billings, Montana, in a brand new performing arts facility that had like 900 seats. Like there wasn't even enough room for us backstage, that our wardrobe was in the back of a truck somewhere. And normally we'd all have our own dressing rooms, but there was a dressing room for the men and a dressing room for the women. And we played these smaller towns, which was kind of exciting.
So my next question, this is going to be this is what I was built for, is stadium tours here with my sports background.
Of course.
Did you ever, in basketball stadiums, when there's a hockey arena as well, they sometimes have some challenges with the floor over the ice. Did you ever have stages over, a hockey rink or an ice, and you had to deal with any of those challenges?
I did not experience this, but I was told that there was one time that they got to a place and they actually put the deck of the set on the floor of the basketball court. And they did the show, and people were in folding chairs. And that was one of the places that they played. But when we played the arenas, we had a built deck, so it was raised higher above everybody. So we weren't on the ice or anything like that, but it was raised higher.
Okay.
And it was always a built up stage. That was one of the requirements, is that they had to have a concert stage that they put our set on top of.
Yeah. And now most of these venues do, because they're going to they're all built to be multifunctional for those things. Let's go back before you get on tour. How much did you know about the show?
I didn't know much about the show other than hearing the recording. I grew up loving musical theater and listening to every recording of anything. And I had listened to the music, but it never really caught on. And it was the 3rd national tour, actually, in 1987 that I saw at the Benedum Center. And I watched the show, and it was exciting and fun, and I enjoyed it. And the lights came up, and I stood up with my friends. I was in college at the time at Clarion University. And I stood up with my friends after the show was done, and I said, well, that's a show I'll never do, because it was completely beyond my comprehension that I would be capable of doing something like that. And, I had been tap dancing since I was 6 years old, and I danced since I was 6. And I was going to school at the time for music education. And then I transferred to Point Park University, consequently, the next year, and went into musical theater. So I got a much more focused education in musical theater. But at the time, I enjoyed it. It was fun. It was exciting. But it really wasn't on my radar. And I literally said, I will never do this show. I'm not capable of doing this show.
That's interesting to hear from a dancer, because a lot of dancers see it and go, wow, I like, especially in the female side with Victoria, they're like, if they were ballet and dancer, they think, hey, this is something I could be doing.
Well,
so to hear a dancer say, I'm not in this, I'm not going to be in this, and then to be in it is kind of wild.
Yeah, but my show was a chorus line. So like I grew up on a chorus line, which was a little bit before Cats, and 42nd Street, which was slightly before Cats. So I was a tap dancer. So I gravitated more toward 42nd Street and My One and Only and all of the tap dance shows like No No Nanette. Those were things that, because I grew up watching Gene Kelly movies. And so I wanted to be a tap dancer. So a chorus line and 42nd Street were the shows that I was like, oh, I can do these. And Cats, because it was so balletic, I wasn't a ballet dancer. It just never dawned on me. So, and I saw it and was like, this is fun. I won't do it, but it's fun.
And the tap number is Jenny usually.
Jenny Any Dots, yeah. That's the Beatles. It's the Cockroaches or the Beatles.
Yep.
And
so let's go into, so beyond your wildest dreams, you end up in the cast as Mungojerrie. And so tell me about what you were told about Mungo and like how to play them and what was the direction you're given for your cat?
Well, it's interesting because I got the tour when I was in college. I auditioned for the show when it came through Heinz Hall. And so I got a call back from then and then auditioned for Skimbleshanks twice in New York City. I auditioned for Skimbleshanks twice in New York City on the Winter Garden stage. And at my second audition, they offered me the German company as Mungojerrie because they told me that I was too young for Skimbleshanks. So then I was doing a production at the Pittsburgh Playhouse of Dames at Sea, and Cats called up and said, hey, we want you to come in for Mungojerrie. There's an opening on the tour, and we need to replace it right away. And I said, well, I can't afford to come. They're like, we're going to fly you there. So I was like, oh, I'll come. Yeah. So I went in, auditioned, got the show, and literally 5 days later, I was in Sacramento, California, meeting the cast. And the first thing they do when you join the cast is tell you the story of Cats. And it's this very long, like hour-long sort of story where they give you the background of all the cats. And of course, it's such a whirlwind because my luggage was like still sitting backstage at this theater in Sacramento, and I'm sitting in the stage manager's office listening to the story of Cats. And it's a joke amongst people who have ever done Cats that, oh, did you hear the story of Cats? And it starts off with Demeter was raped. And that's, but that's the joke that goes around. But they literally take like an hour and a half delving into the backstory of all these cats. The unfortunate thing about that is for someone like me, I knew nothing about the show. I saw it once in 1987. I didn't even see it when it came through Heinz Hall when I auditioned for it in 1990 or whenever it was. So I still was unfamiliar with it. And they're telling you these stories about Demeter and Bob Melia and Cassandra and Deuteronomy. And you're listening to all these names and you're like, okay. And, I think there was like maybe paperwork that had this story in it or something. I can't remember. It's been so long ago. It's almost 30 years since I joined the company. And then it's basically you and the dance captain in a studio. So you would be in whatever city you were in, and they would rent a studio, a dance studio, a local dance studio, and they would take you there with mirrors and start teaching you the show. And it basically is 3 weeks that they have to teach you your entire part. And at the time, I had joined the company at the same time that Stephen Birtles, who was a swing on the show. He covered 5 or 6, possibly even 7 roles in the show. And we learned the basic show together. So we were in a room together learning the show together.
That's amazing. I'm still waiting. I've heard the story of Cats and even the joke about Demeter, because that's, I think, a crazy part of the story. That's just like, it's a known piece of it. I've yet to find anybody who can give me that story, like who can provide that story for me. I'm looking for someone to give me that like rundown because I've been trying to figure it out myself.
Well, it's so interesting because Cats is such an individual show that, we talk about the tracks in Broadway musicals, and it's because of shows like Cats and shows that have these epic, ensembles in them that, there are times when you do the same type of choreography or you're doing the same thing, but everybody has their own journey through the show. So as Mungojerrie, I also covered over the course of time, I covered Skimbleshanks, and then I also covered Gus, the theater cat. I understudied both of those. And like I think on other times you were talking about the different perspectives of the different cats. But my perspective of Cats was taught to me from Mungojerrie's perspective. So I could probably tell you what the story of Cats is based on my perception as Mungo. But the story of Cats itself, because they tell it the first day you're there, when you're just excited getting off a plane to like be on a big contract and doing the show, I don't remember half of it. But it also, the story itself changes and evolves based on, number one, who's in the show, what character or what person is playing it, but also who the supervisor at the time might be, because this was a tour that ran for 12 years. And we didn't always have the same music supervisor. We had Richard Stafford, who was one of the choreographers on the show, was with us a good majority of the time. But there was 6 months that Cynthia Onrubia, who was the original White Cat, came out as the dance supervisor when Richard took a sabbatical. Eddie Robinson, I think, was our music supervisor for a very long time. And David Taylor, who was the director of the show, was with us for a very long time. But the production stage manager from New York would come out to sort of maintain the show. Mm-hmm. So everybody had their version of the show that they would tell you and teach you. And, and it was fluid and changed constantly.
I love it because I feel like my goal is to influence the next person who has to go do that.
Who does the show. Exactly. Yeah.
So tell me your version from Mungojerrie's lens of the story of Cats.
Okay, well, you probably heard this numerous times. This basically is a junkyard in this tribe of cats that comes together once a year to basically have Deuteronomy choose who is that special cat that goes to be reborn and get to come back in a new life. And for that, the way I look at it is, basically the show was an experiment. It was an experiment for Andrew Lloyd Webber, who found Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats in an airport and thought, I wonder if I could put poems to music. And he did that, and then it turned into a musical somehow. So once it turned into a musical composition, then they had to sort of put somewhat of a plot in it so the actors could at least make sense of it. But from a perspective of sitting in the audience, there is no plot. And I'm going to say that there is no plot to Cats other than, what is sort of inflicted and forced upon it. So from Mungojerrie's point of view, Munkustrap, who is this leader of this tribe, he would be, I guess, Deuteronomy is the father of this tribe, basically. Mm-hmm. And Munkustrap is sort of the protector of the tribe and sort of the narrator of what is the evening. And these little vignettes that come out are everybody's choice, putting forth who they think should go to the Heaviside Layer. And, Munkustrap's first choice is Jenny Anydots. That's the first one he chooses. And like Busterford Jones is, the Gumby Cats, that's her choice to go to the Heaviside Layer. And of course, throughout this entire time where people are trying to put forth the person who they think, Skimbleshanks is Deuteronomy's choice. He's the one who actually starts Skimbleshanks. And throughout this, Grizabella happens upon this and interrupts basically the event and what's happening. And the same thing with Macavity. The Macavity and Grizabella are sort of the outsiders of this tribe, who used to be a part of the tribe, but they're the outsiders of the tribe that sort of interrupt the festivities for the evening.
So that's a super interesting way to say this. So if I'm hearing you correctly, mm-hmm. what you're saying is that Old Deuteronomy was choosing Skimbleshanks, but got interrupted by Grizabella and changes his choice.
Well, if you look at, this is of course from Mungojerrie's perspective, if you look at the way that everybody, like Jelly Loram comes forward and presents Gus, and she mm-hmm. sings about Gus. In the original production, Mistopheles sang the song Mungojerrie Rumpelteazer. So in a sense, he was kind of, not saying that they should be, but if you look at the course of the evening, each one of these cats is presenting somebody else. Again, Mungojerrie Rumpelteazer are basically outsiders that are sort of crashing the party. Yeah. And even though they're there the entire time, they make everybody think that it's Macavity once again. And of course, because they're mischievous, they interrupt the proceedings. But each one of these vignettes is somebody putting someone forward to say, hey, this is, whereas possibly Rum Tum Tugger is another one who comes in and he basically is saying, I should go to the Heaviside Layer because he interrupts the process,
for himself. Yep.
For himself. And so each way that happens. whereas there are so many things that are sort of brought into the proceedings, and then of course it's all disrupted at the end anyway, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I've always viewed Old Deuteronomy as decision maker, judge and jury, and father.
He is, and he's supposed to be judge and jury, and that's why he's, when he comes on stage, and everybody, of course, is like just welcoming him on stage, because he is sort of the judge and jury, and everybody looks to him for guidance. And because even at the beginning of the show, Mungojerrie says, when Old Deuteronomy, just before dawn, through a silence you feel you can cut, announces the cat who can now be reborn. So he, I think, comes into this Deuteronomy, is looking at all of this, because he happens upon the scene halfway through Act 1. So he's not even there when Gumby Cat's being presented, and when Rum Tum Tugger comes in and interrupts. So it's.
Yeah,
and Buster Jones, he's not even there yet.
So that kind of strengthens the case for Skimbleshanks of this is his choice. He's presenting him. He's kind of leading into it.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I've never really thought about it from each person is bringing it, besides for Jelly Lorm. That's the one where it seems really obvious that she's almost, because he's incapable, I'm going to present for him. Correct. On his behalf. But I've not thought about all the other ones.
Something with Mungojerrie. He's like, I have a Gumby Cat in mind,
Yeah.
But originally, in the original Broadway company, Mistopheles sang that first part of it. I think it was Timothy Scott because Timothy Scott was a really big singer. But over the course of time, they hired Mistopheles, who were really great dancers, but not great singers. So Mungojerrie's role kind of evolved and changed a little more because, they didn't have a Mistopheles that was a singer.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about Mungo, Jerry Rumpelteazer.
Okay.
They're a tough one to try to figure out. It seems like their cat's family tree is they have collars, right? So
they are domesticated cats.
They're domesticated, and that's why they can have the ability to be a little, have the mischief in their mind. It seems like they're henchmen for Macavity.
Actually, they're not henchmen for Macavity. No, they're mischievous cats. They would like people to believe that they're henchmen for Macavity, but I think Macavity is more sinister than what Mungo Rump. When you listen to Mungo Rump's song, it's a lot more fun, and they like to steal things and push things around and move things. They're the cat that's sitting on the counter that's knocking stuff off, and you put it back up on the counter and they're knocking it off. They're not gonna abduct someone and actually, whatever the case. So I don't really feel that they're henchmen of Macavity's, although they would like people to believe that they are.
So are they the equivalent of the rich kids who don't need to steal but are stealing and know that they don't really have any consequences most likely coming to them because they
correct. That's how I view it. Because why would they be domesticated? Why would they have collars on? And and they're this sort of tumble about,
How much did you think about who their owners were related to? Did you think about the Cat's family tree when you were playing the show?
It's interesting because you can literally spiral into, a rabbit hole trying to think. I'm sure you have. You could spiral into that rabbit hole, but there are many of the cats, even though they're part of this junkyard tribe, there are many cats that have collars. Bombalurina wears a collar. Cassandra has a collar, at least the costume that in our company, she had a beautiful collar. So Cassandra, who's an Abyssinian, is a domesticated cat because she's that prissy cat. Victoria is a domesticated cat. Syllabub is a domesticated cat. Rum Tum Tugger is a domesticated cat. But, most of them have collars. It's a few like Alonzo that doesn't. Tumble Brutus has a collar. Pouncival doesn't have a collar. So most of them are all domesticated cats, which is really, really interesting. So, and they've sort of become this tribe because they're indoor-outdoor cats,
Mm-hmm.
So they all escape and come to this junkyard every year. So it's kind of this party to escape the worlds they actually live in.
Yeah, that's okay. That's interesting. One other thing about the dance, because this is something I have not been able to go. It's hard to find archive of your production. Mm-hmm. And one thing that I remember from the 1998 movie, which I don't think they did in 2016, is that Mungojerrie and Rumpelteazer did this joint cartwheel.
Oh, yeah.
Did you do the joint cartwheel?
Yes, we did. Yeah. And actually, it was Mickey Lubeck who was the assistant dance captain. Jen Cody was my partner at the time. She was my rumple teaser at the time on the road. And she was on vacation. And we normally did 5 connecting cartwheels across the stage. And of course, I did the number with, I had 6 different onstage rumple teasers that I had done the show with over the course of the 3.5 years. But I had done the number total with 18 different women. And they were all different sizes, like, different leg heights. And of course, those cartwheels really work well if you have the same length legs. And it was when Jen was on vacation and Mickey said, "Do you want to do 7?" And I was like, "What? Is there enough room on stage to do 7 cartwheels across the stage?" And she's like, "Yeah, you just got to do them faster." And, Mickey was like, "Let's do it." So we did it. And so I started doing 7. And then Jen came back and they occasionally, swing people in and out of the show to watch the show or do this and that. And when Jen came back, they had swung her out, and she had been back for a couple of weeks, a month or whatever, and they wanted to swing people out to see. And Mickey was on again, and she was like, "Should we do 7 again?" And I was like, "Sure, let's do it." We did 7, and at intermission, my dressing room door slammed open, and it was Jen Cody, and she was like, "We're doing 7." And I was like, "Okay, 7." So then the norm became doing 7 of those cartwheels across the stage, and then I think with Dana Sullivan, I think I did them with Maria Jo Ralabate. We did 7 with Dana Salamando. I did 7. Yeah, but it was fun, and they're actually fun. And we did a lot of tumbling and in the show. And my partner, I'm 5'7", and all of my partners were like 4'10", 4'11", and they were so much shorter than me. And they were maybe 100 pounds, 98 pounds. And I look at what we did in the number, at my age now in life, and think, I don't even think I can do a cartwheel anymore, let alone have somebody climbing all over me, tumbling upside down, and then connecting to each other and going across the stage. But it was fun. And when you're 24, it's exciting. When you're my age, it's not so exciting.
Yeah. Well, as a non-dancer, that's one thing. When I saw the 1998 movie, I'm like, oh my God, like that sounds so difficult. And something I couldn't even comprehend as a non-dancer, and then not a tumbler too, even, it seems like.
Yeah. Well, what I have to say about the company that I went into the company in 1992, and the people that I started working with had been together for an entire year. It was one of the slickest, most talented group of people I had ever seen in my lifetime. And what was so interesting about it is when one person left, somebody else would come in that was equally as talented in a different way. And that was the least of the tumbling that happened in the show. Jim Rutman, who was the first McCavity that I remember on the show, was 6'4" and tumbled like he was like, Simone Biles, like as tiny as Simone Biles. Stephen Birtles, who I learned the show with, was this phenomenal tumbler. Every single person, Mark Holland, Tim Hunter, Joey Favalora, they were tumblers extraordinaire that literally were upside down more than they were on their feet in the show. And I did the least amount of tumbling in the show. And people still remember Mungojerrie, Rumple Teaser as the tumblers. And there were other cats that did far more than I ever did in the show.
I think that's something that you as a cast member, and especially, or as dancers, like if you're, you study it, you're going to pick that up. Yeah. And as a audience member without that, why it sticks out is because I think it's you two by yourself for most of that. And I don't, the rest of the stuff was happening, and I'm sure there was a bunch of stuff happening, and it was just like, it's so visually overwhelming at points that I'm just like, I don't remember half of what happened. Yeah,
because they're tumbling when there are, 20 other cats on stage. So, and we were by ourselves. So people do remember that. But the good thing about it is I never had to do the cartwheels on a rake stage. So
that was going to be my next question, because I didn't know about what a rake stage was until probably 30 episodes into this podcast. And then someone brought it up, and I didn't know that was a thing, didn't realize it. And I was like, God, I was already impressed. And then I heard about that, and I was like, that just seems, no wonder there's so many injuries is kind of what I heard. Yeah.
Every company except the last, like ours and probably the last tour that went out, and of course the 2005 tour, the non-union tour that went out, they used our set, and so it was a flat stage. But every tour 1, 2, and 3 and the Broadway all had rake stages, which was,
that is crazy.
And I auditioned on the stage, and it's It's hard because when I went back to audition for the show after I had left it and I was dancing all the combinations that I knew, I was like, it's a totally different balance. So
for sure. Now I want to switch gears a little bit because you told me that you've had the pleasure of being a director of a production.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Tell me what it's like. Tell me, where, when, and then what it's like being on that side of the stage for Cats.
Well, I was the founding artistic director of Lincoln Park Performing Arts Center in Midland, Pennsylvania, and we housed a high school for performing arts. And it was the first year we opened, and we had this group of the most talented group of kids I've ever seen. And it was like, somebody was like, we have to do a big show that's a big bang. And they're like, why don't you do Cats? And I was like, really? Okay. So we did Cats, and we had, a set from California come in, and I was fortunate because, first of all, I had done the show for 3.5 years, 2,225 performances. So I kind of knew the show inside and out. And I had played Skimbleshanks, Mungojerrie and Gus, but also I was fortunate to have probably one of the best dance captains I've ever worked with. Chuck Lubeck, who was our dance captain, was so thorough about how he taught the show and maintained the show. That I learned from him how to really teach the show because he was so methodical about how he chose to choose. Because when you know the show, you play your role every night. But when I started learning Skimbleshanks, there was a way that he could explain things that, like, okay, as Mungo, you're here, and that group of people does this, and you're back here doing that. And as Gus, the swirl all happens around you because Gus is the non-dancer, so you just get to the center. So as he was teaching me the other roles that I played, and then, of course, from watching the show from different perspectives, we always laugh because Chuck said to me, whoever played Mungojerrie originally was either really young and ambitious or really stupid because the track is really, really hard. And it was a really hard track. Like the hard tracks in the show, of course, are Mistopheles because he dances, Pouncible because he dances with Mistopheles, and Victoria and Cassandra because they're always dancing in the front. But Mungojerrie is like this, if you needed to pick something up, there I am carrying something across the stage. It's like, why is this my responsibility? But we also, in our company, didn't have the twin cats. Coricapat and Tantamile didn't exist. So Mungo Rump did the Coricapat Tantamile track in our show. So we only had 20 cats, not 22 or 24. So in directing the show, I went back to how I learned the show from Chuck. And luckily, I also had what was the Cat's Bible. There's basically what they call a Bible that is all of the charts and everything that, you keep good charts across the show and you know where people go. So if you charted your life really well, you know exactly. And because I played 3 different characters, I knew where they went. Mm-hmm. And so, and I attest directing the show and knowing the choreography from Chuck Lubeck, who was brilliant. So directing the show, I'm a traditionalist, and I try to stay as close to what the original intention of the show was, from knowing what, of course, Linda A. Lavin, who was our stage manager, taught us when we were first there. David O'Brien, who was my stage manager when I left the show, and of course all of David Taylor coming out. You sort of assimilate all of this information, and it's kind of being in Cats and being a part of Cats, much like 42nd Street and A Chorus Line and even Hamilton and these new shows that are long-running shows. It's a fraternity or a sorority. Once you do it, it sort of never leaves you, and nobody else sort of outside of that understands the experience because you all experience together. You may have experienced it in 1981, or you may have experienced it in 1995 or 2005, but the show itself really is the same structure and the same intention. So passing that on to another generation, to me, was kind of my responsibility to sort of pass along that information that I learned.
Mm-hmm. How do I get my hands on a Cat's Bible?
On a Cat's Bible? I don't know. How much you going to bribe me? It's really, the Cat's Bible is really, it's really crazy to say that. It literally is just a book full of charts with X's and initials in it. That's it. Like it's a picture of the stage, and it'll have like the title of what the section is. And it's the same thing with the chorus line. There's a chorus line Bible, and every dance captain across the country has a Bible. Or if you're a ridiculous person like me, you create your own Bible. And I'm sure everybody you've talked to, if they still keep it, because I'm a director choreographer, I keep every note that I ever take on every show I work on. So I have Bibles for every single show that I create. But it's interesting, yeah. But it's basically, you would look at it and not understand any of it.
Yeah, because that's kind of why I want one, is I want to be like, all right, let's see how much I can learn from this, and how much I actually pick up any of what I'm seeing on this chart. Because I'm used to, again, being more of an athlete, is I'm used to seeing plays drawn up on a board, and it's very
similar. It's very similar to a playbook. It really is similar to a playbook, but the difference is it all depends on what company it is. Like the first national is totally different, even though the same people put it together, is different from the second national. The third national is different because of the way the set was designed, and our set was different, so you have to maneuver different ways. So, but it's cool. It's interesting.
I'm hopeful one day to get my hands on it, on any version, any copy, any even copy of a copy.
Yeah.
How much of the cat story did you tell? And you said high school students. I mean, did you start with Demeter was raped? Like,
no, I know. You don't start with that. You can say abducted, or or you say abducted or whatever. You just use your words carefully, and you try to, because you're basically trying to get them to all be a part of the same story. And that it's interesting because in your other podcast, you say that there are 3 words that everybody gets 3 words. I don't remember 3 words, and they may have told me 3 words, but I don't remember that. And they probably did tell me, but I was just so young and stupid, I don't remember it. But I thought, that's a really good concept. That's a really good concept to give each of these characters 3 things to go from. Well, but
I think they have to in this show, because you're not given the clean story. It's like usually in a lot of the other shows, you're given the story and the arc, and here's what they're doing, and you can really, since there's enough of a story, you can always tie it together. Where this is not there, it's like you're running around behind the scenes. You're all there. You're all at the ball. You're all there. So it's like you need something like that to kind of give enough for you as an actor to be able to craft your version of it.
Well, and the one thing that I can say about putting the show together when everybody starts at the same time is a lot easier, because you have a room full of people all on the same page starting with it. Yeah. When you learn the show in a studio by yourself, and they're literally saying, okay, Demeter's to your left, and I always had to keep saying, what color are they? Yeah. What color is this cat? Are they orange? Are they white? Are they brown? Are they male? Are they female? But sometimes you couldn't even tell that, because you're in this sea of just fur and like leg warmers, and you're just trying to make sure you're not going to knock into anybody. And when you learn something as a whole, as a group, it seems a lot easier, because then you have more of a perspective, because you're all starting at the same point. They would come out on occasion and do what they called cat classes, where they would literally break you back down to cat behavior and things. And I think a lot of times that's missed within the show. I think the genius of the show really is Gillian Lynn and her choreography, and how the movement sort of dictates how each one of the cats, or who they are. The fact that the kittens spend most of their time on their hands and knees, and that there are very few cats that really walk upright. Mungojerrie is really the only one who's the protector, who stands upright, or Cassandra or Bombayarina. So that genius of the physicality of the show is really what is interesting to a lot of audience members, because there is no plot. And they spend a lot of time on that. Yes, the steps are important and this and that, but then they really did take a lot of time with us to make sure that we were behaving like cats, and we were never really allowed to stand up straight. Yeah. Ever in the show. And we were never allowed to put our heels down either, which was the other thing. It's like, you can't walk on your heels. So, we had very short hamstrings. No, but
That is fun. Let's do some rapid fire.
Okay.
Because I want to switch gears to that. If
Mhm.
you could, I know you played Skimble and
Mhm.
Gus and Mungo. If you could play any track, male, female, forget vocal range, forget dancing, just if you could just suspend reality and do any one particular cat for a day, who would you want to do?
It's interesting. I was cast in the right role in the show. I love doing Mungojerrie, and I'm as mischievous a person as Mungojerrie was, and I got in a lot of trouble on stage. But I love playing Mungo, and if I still could, to this day, could physically do it, I'd play him again. Because although I enjoyed Skimbleshanks, he wasn't involved enough in the show. He sat and watched a lot of it, and I was involved all the time. Now, if I were a better dancer, I would want to play Mistopheles, but that's way too much pressure for me. That's a lot of pressure doing that many turns and doing that many skills and dancing that much in the show. So I'm going to stick with Mungojerrie. If I could play any of them, I was thrilled to be a part of that because I was always busy and always involved in it all the time.
Stay
which
true.
is great. Yeah, I have to stay true to it. Yeah.
Who are your favorite and least favorite cats?
My favorite cat is Bomb Ballerina because of one reason. Helen Frank, who was our Bomb Ballerina on the road, was equally as amazing off stage as she was on stage. And she was the total opposite of who the character was. She was this sexy bombshell on stage who was so phenomenal and amazing. And she was the kindest, sweetest, most loving person off stage. And it was just two totally different things. And so I'm always, Bomb Ballerina is one of my favorite characters, and it's all because of Helen Frank. And I bet you there are probably many, many people that would say that same thing. So Bomb is my favorite. My least favorite is the Rumpus Cat. I hate the Rumpus Cat. I don't know why. It's just the most ridiculous thing. And in the new version, it's in Act 2, which is odd, but and Peaks and Pollicles was one of my features, but I just hated the whole Rumpus Cat thing. It just seemed ridiculous to me. It just seemed a reason for John Napier to hey, let me build some more costumes here.
Yeah.
So
that's fair. What about favorite song from the show?
Again, it has to do with the performances of the people that I know. Elaine Wiggins, who was Demeter opposite Helen Frank's Bomb Ballerina, Grizabella the Glamour Cat, and McCavity are two of my favorite songs in the show because of the way that those two women sang and did those songs. They were amazing to me.
McCavity's become my favorite. Okay, so this is my newer question that I've thoroughly enjoyed. Which cat personality do you think would be thriving, living their best life in the early 90s when you were on tour in that setting, and then in today? In 2021?
Hands down, it has to be the Rum Tum Tugger because he didn't give a crap about anything then. He didn't give a crap about now. Still living his best life. He's totally the Mick Jagger rocker that in the 90s, in his heyday was phenomenal and still 78 years old on the road, still doing his gig. It has to be the Rum Tum Tugger. As much as it's one of those things that I never would want to play him or be around him or have him as a pet, but he would live his best life in the 90s, and he would still be living his best life now, 9 lives later. Yeah.
I don't think there's an era where he's not living his best life.
No, absolutely not. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, my $1 million question, the whole basis for this podcast. So this question is coming, so I hope you're ready. But I've argued that I don't think Grizabella is the right Jellicle choice. So I want to hear...
I have a theory behind that of why you think that. Go ahead.
Okay. I want to hear, do you want to defend Grizabella as the right choice, or do you want to, if you were Old Deuteronomy, who are you picking?
Well, here's the first thing. Deuteronomy didn't pick Grizabella.
Tell me more.
If you notice in the show, Grizabella comes out and she interrupts yet again for probably the 5th time in the show. She comes out and finally everybody stands back and lets her finally have her say because she's always shunned and pushed away and everybody makes her go away. Even in the Jellicle Ball, we're dancing toward her and Tumble Brutus is scratching at her to get her out of there. She comes back and Deuteronomy actually watches her due Little Memory. He sits on stage, watch her, what we call Little Memories, the end of Act 1. She comes back in Act 2, and she finally gets to have her say. But it's actually Victoria, the white cat, who chooses Grizabella. She's the one who crawls across the stage, looks back at Deuteronomy, and she's the one who puts her paw in Grizabella's hand. And so it's really Victoria and the rest of the cats that choose Grizabella. Because Deuteronomy probably had a choice for someone, and it was the actual whole tribe. And that's why it starts with Victoria. All the kittens go around her. We all accept her. Then she goes down what we call the procession line. And all the cats basically accept her to the point where even Bombayarina, Demeter, all of those people accept her. And then it's Deuteronomy who finally gives his consent when everybody else chooses her. So I think Deuteronomy did have another choice, but, majority says we want Grizabella.
So I love any time that I'm hearing a different version from how I've ever thought about it. So your version is he's probably picking Skimbleshanks because it's who he's presenting.
That's sort of who he's presenting, and he has many choices that he could choose.
And he hasn't made his decision, and he's probably already kind of made up his mind, but he has mob mentality of all the cats, and he gives into peer pressure.
Yeah. I think that's what it is. And I think, but it's funny because I like to tell this story because Richard Poole, who was Gus on the road for a while, he's one of the funniest people I know. We used to have to do television interviews all the time. And everybody always asked the same question that you ask. What is Cats about? And his off-the-cuff answer always was, when he was on a television interview, they would say, what is Cats about? And he would say, forgiveness. And it's kind of the truth. Like, the show really is, when they say, what is Cats about? It's about forgiveness. And it used to always make me laugh because it was, he would say forgiveness and then nothing else.
Yeah.
And so the interviewer always just like, oh, okay. But that's really what it is about, because despite whatever Grizabella experienced away from the tribe, she was one of that tribe. Same thing with McCavity. He was one of the tribe. And for some reason, he and Munkustrap didn't get along, so he was banished. And then he comes back and kidnaps Deuteronomy, and Grizabella, who just wanted to be a part of the party, wants to be forgiven. And eventually she is forgiven because she finally sings that ballad and says, forgive me. And so everybody does.
Yeah. I understand it. I do think that I love that answer of just like, it's forgiveness. I've always said it's forgiveness. It's redemption. It's
redemption, forgiveness. But Richard Poole's answer was forgiveness. Yeah.
And that's it. Yeah. And it's fun. The reason I asked the question is I just love hearing everyone has a different answer. So it's fun to kind of hear all the different versions of it. Until someone gives me a Cat's Bible, I'm not going to have an answer.
But none of that's in the Cat's Bible.
I know.
It's like being in Cats is like being a Mason. They don't have anything written down. It's all like oral and passed down. It's passed down orally because everybody's interpretation is different, and every stage manager's interpretation is different. And the version that I do, and that's, I think, what's so great about the show is it is open to interpretation, but you really can't stray far. You can't really stray too far from the blueprint for it to work, because it's that backstory that we all learn that. And here's the thing: I could sit down for 3 hours and give you the entire backstory, but it really still doesn't explain what the show is about.
No, it doesn't give you it's not neat and tidy. And that's, I think, where the challenge is. Okay. So it sounds like your choice is Grizabella. I just want to make sure I get the on the record choice.
My on the record choice is, it's hard to say because do I think Gus is deserving of it? Yeah, I do think Gus is deserving of it. 'Cause he's just old and senile. And he has palsy, so like put him out of his misery, So I do think Gus is probably more deserving than Grizabella, but I think there's a lesson in Grizabella going to the Heaviside layer, more so than Gus going or Skimbleshank going, because Skimbleshank probably has more to do and more to say. Same thing with the Gumby Cat. She and Jelly Lorem are considered the aunts of, and same thing with Skimbleshank. He's the uncle of all these kittens. And they still have lessons to teach. Whereas Grizabella, her entire example of her life is the lesson to learn. Don't go down this path, but that's what's going to happen to you. So I think Gus is just as deserving as Grizabella is. And I think of everybody in the show, it is either Gus or Grizabella, because the rest of them still have stuff to do.
What was your theory on my interpretation? You said that you had an idea of why
why the wrong cat died, because most people don't realize that it's not Deuteronomy that picks Grizabella. That's the theory, because it's actually Victoria who makes the choice. She's the one that's like, she's the one that should go, and it's Deuteronomy that lets her choose. So it's really Victoria's fault. It's all Victoria's fault, because somebody else probably would have gone.
I like blaming that. And also, I know you said you didn't see the new movie, but they use Victoria as the narrator essentially for the story arc. And that makes a little bit of sense there from that part too.
Yeah. It's funny, on the road when we were tired, or we were to the point where you're like doing 16 shows in a row, we would just be like, go touch somebody, just tell Victoria to go touch her in the small memory, so we don't have to do act 2. Go, and that would be the thing. Go push her, go touch her.
That's awesome. The only thing, I think we've covered a ton today, so thank you. It's been super fun. I'm glad to chat about it. It's been 30 years since I could. It's always fun to reminisce on it and to humor me with all the stuff that I'm still trying to piece together for my own cat's Bible I'm working on. I know you're currently, what are you up to today? I know you're at another theater. And so tell me a little bit what you're doing now.
Yeah, I'm the Associate Artistic Director of Temple Theater in Sanford, North Carolina. I'm also the Marketing Director, and we are sort of coming up on our post-COVID season, getting back to doing theater. And so we do a 7-show main stage season, professional theater, and we have an educational arm. And right now, here in the summer, we do 5 different summer camps for kids between the ages of 4 and 18. And our next venture is starting our main stage season. So that's what I'm sort of in the process of doing, is marketing and getting ready to gear up for the season.
Well, if you ever do a production of Cats, I would like to be brought in as a consultant.
Actually, our theater was built in 1925, and we are coming up on our 100th anniversary, and we're hoping that we're going to do sort of a best of the best of all of the shows we've done in the past 30 years or so, and Cats has been on the short list for that. And hopefully in 2025, I'll still be able to dance enough to direct it and choreograph it again. So if we do it, you can come see it, and I'll have you down as a guest.
I want to come and be the consultant on, like, okay, I'm going to fill in the blanks that were not filled in on the backstory of each cat.
That has to be interesting, because a friend of mine bought his father years ago tickets to go see Cats. And when he came from home after seeing it, he said, "So, Dad, what did you think of the show?" And his dad's response was, "I thought it was about cats. I didn't know they were cats." Because everybody, like from an outside perspective, not being told that story, you don't know what the heck you're seeing. You're basically going to see what is a spectacle. And it ran so long in New York City because it was the show that tourists went to see, because they didn't have to understand English to watch the show.
Definitely.
Because it was just a spectacle, and there was a lot of fun, and it basically is poetry set to music.
Yep.
So it ran so long because it was that show that people would choose. But I have to say that the touring company that I was a part of truly was a phenomenon because of the talent and because of the maintenance on the show. We had great stage managers, we had great musicians, great conductors. Like I said, Chuck Lubeck kept that show clean like you wouldn't believe. And it was such a high energy show and the portrayals of all the people around me were really, really spectacular performances. And not only was it sometimes for people in the audience like yourself, it wasn't about, what is this story about? Some of them would be fixated on a character like Cassandra, who literally, there were women who played it on the road that you thought they were cats. I mean, the way they portrayed and the way they moved on stage is, even just that aspect of it is the phenomenon of the fact that they look like cats on stage. It's,
you can watch the show from a lot of angles. I mean, I know there's more recently, there's the junkyard, the group of fans who will go and watch a track and a person. Even for me, I was pretty mesmerized by the set when I got in there and just like even seeing how incredible that is. So,
and you saw it without the pirate ship that used to come down. In Act 2, when Gus does it, he used to reminisce about being Growl Tiger, and the entire back part of the set would literally come down over top of the entire set, and it was a pirate set, and like a pirate ship on the stage, and that's not in the new version. But we had to talk about fans and the super fans. We to this day, there are super fans that I think I might still be in contact with on Facebook. But you'd walk out of the stage door, and they would have complete artist renderings of your face. And this is before the internet or before social media and anything. And you're wondering, how did they get my picture? But they had seen the show so many times that they were doing full-on renderings, artist renderings of you and your partner in the show. And they still exist to this day, where when the show closed in New York, they all went to New York and bought pieces of the set and they have collections. So you could probably learn. I'm sure there's a website somewhere. I'll send you a link to, I think there's a website somewhere that is this group of people that still is collecting, and I'm sure they probably have seen the show more than I did the show.
Yeah, which is a fun piece to it too.
Yeah.
Well, this has been super fun. I love, again, anytime someone gives me a slightly different version of another version I've heard, which you did today, it always makes this fun, and it's what keeps this show going. So I appreciate you taking the time to come on and
I'm glad you asked me. It's fun. Thanks so much for having me.
And thanks for listening to this episode on The Wrong Cat Died, the podcast breaking down the catastrophe. To follow along, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or anywhere else you listen to podcasts. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at The Wrong Cat Died, or check out our website, thewrongcatdied.com.